Somehow the winter air seems warmer than your car.
This happened quite a few years ago when I was 11. Now, when I look back, I'm kind of proud of the way I handled it. It was late at night and very cold in the dead of winter, and I was asked to pick up some groceries by my father at our local supermarket. It was in walking distance, and I, being an obedient child, did not refuse and set out with a goal. I, also being foolish, forgot to put a coat on, but continued shivering and walking, making my way down to the destination. I exhaled in relief at the rush of warm air when I stepped inside and quickly shuffled over to the corresponding shelves, because my items were there. Grabbing the stuff I needed, I paid and headed out once again into the merciless cold. It seemed much colder than when I went inside, but maybe that was because I had gotten used to the warmth. I continued walking when I felt an uncomfortable weight, the heaviness of a stare. I looked around but noticed nothing really out of place. Cars passing, flickering lampposts that God forbid the city fixes. Most of them are out and I didn't have a cell phone. And houses turning in for the night. So I huffed and continued walking my disgruntled self back to the house, the feeling never leaving. I was 2 streets away from my destination when I felt a hum of a car. That was a taxi. Pull up beside me. I looked over and the person rolled down their window, revealing a middle-aged man who seemed rather normal, but something felt uncomfortable about him. He smiled at me and called out, "Hey, miss, do you need a ride? It's rather cold." I shook my head. Kind offer or not, it didn't seem okay to me, so I replied, "No, thank you." His smile slowly slid off his face before he quickly fixed it. Then he tried again. "Are you sure? I wouldn't mind at all. It would be a pleasure." I'm not sure if it was my paranoia or not, but his voice held a very different tone at the word pleasure. I once again said no and continued to walk, while debating what to do. He followed me for a street asking if I was sure, and to let him give me a ride. I didn't want him to know where I lived, and I also wanted him to leave. So I pointed to a white house a few away from where we were located and told him, "Oh look, I'm already home. Thank you anyways." His face dropped out of his friendly facade and sped off down the road as I started jogging home. Even though he was gone, I still just wanted to be home. I never told anyone this till I was 14 and sitting with one of my friends telling stories. After I said this, she paused and looked at me and she told me how serious that was and how I could have been hurt or worse. So yes, taxi man, your car may be warm, and I'm not sure of your intentions, but I prefer the winter night.
No more shortcut.
This story took place about 15 years ago, back in the day when there were no iPhones, just iPods. In fact, this is the day and age where the iPod video was just released, and this was pretty revolutionary for a kid my age. It made school a hell of a lot more fun, and it also made walking a hell of a lot more fun. I used to walk back and forth to school, which was actually about a 3-mile walk. I know it seems pretty far for a kid, especially preteen, but I lived alone with my father and he didn't have the time or schedule that matched with mine, so it was my only option. Most of the days when I'd walk home from school, I had no problems, but noticed that I was pretty oblivious to my surroundings, being so enthralled with my iPod. I used to take a shortcut that cut through some wetlands and took about 20 minutes off my walk. But this shortcut was also pretty secluded. There was no running road for cars to pass, just bikers and hikers. And technically, I'm pretty sure it wasn't legal to be walking there, seeing as it was marked private property. But it took such a good portion out of my walk, and I was so used to it and accustomed to the scenery that this was the route I took nearly every single day. One day I stayed after school to play basketball with some friends. This meant I was walking home at about 6 o'clock at night. By the time I get to the shortcut, it's about 7 o'clock at night. I guess I was walking slow, not paying attention or something. Anyway, I get to my shortcut and I get about halfway through the shortcut in the middle of nowhere, about a half mile from the entrance to my neighborhood and a half mile from the entrance to the shortcut. It's just getting dark and I'm starting to get a little creeped out and paranoid, but I just continue walking. At this point, I'm turning my iPod down little by little, trying to pay more attention to my surroundings. And that's when I hear something. It was clearly a whistle, a human whistle. Think the sound someone makes to call their dog. It came from behind me. I kind of freaked out, but didn't let it bother me too much, and just kept walking at the same pace. About 5 seconds later, I heard a similar whistle come from a completely different direction. This really creeped me out, and I picked up the pace. As I started walking faster, I decided to put my iPod on pause, but to pretend like it was still playing and continue my air drumming. At this point, I could hear footsteps in the surrounding area. There was definitely somebody nearby, if not multiple people. Again, like I said, this is private property, so it's either the owner, which I'd be trespassing if caught, or it's somebody doing something that I don't want to see. At this point, I'm about a quarter mile from the entrance to my neighborhood. It's just dark enough to not be able to see further than about 200 yards in any distance. Also, you have to keep in mind that the wetlands that I walk through are heavily bushed. At this point, I decide I better just run. And the burst of adrenaline really got me going, to be honest. I don't think I've ever ran that fast in my life. As I'm running, I could hear the footsteps behind me picking up. And then, from my peripheral, I could see someone from the left side running towards me. He was much older than I was, probably mid-20s, but back then he seemed like he was 40. And he was also much faster than me. If it wasn't for the fact that he was using the 200-yard distance to stay hidden, there's no way I would have made it out. As soon as I got to my neighborhood's entrance, I just started screaming. I did this because I know most of my neighbors, and if any of them heard me, they would come to help. I screamed from the entrance of my neighborhood, 3 streets down, all the way to my house. As I approached my house, my dad came running out and asked me what happened, and at first he seemed kind of mad at me. After I told him what had happened, he jumped in his truck and told me to jump in with him. We got in and I took him to the place where I'd last seen the guys. We stayed parked there for about 5 minutes, my dad just staring down the wetland path. We never ended up seeing them again. But about 2 months later, a biker was attacked in the same area. He was assaulted and robbed by multiple men. This biker was a 40-year-old man of good build. Mind you, he was out biking. And this made me cringe at the thought, what would have happened if it were me? After that, they put up a huge fence with barbed wire blockading my shortcut to stop trespassers, presumably because of the incident. But needless to say, I never took the shortcut home anyway, and wasn't planning to. So to the 2 or 3 people that ruined my shortcut, thanks a lot, and let's not meet.